Hey man, good to see you again. I figured while I had some time, I would do a second video for you. We've got a little bit of time before we leave to go out for the day, and I figured I'd share a little bit more with you. That little exercise I just played for you, I play often. I mean, filming these videos is quite literally the very first time I picked up the sticks today. And so one warm-up that I use a lot when I have a morning like this where I'm just getting started, still a little groggy, I want to play something that's familiar to my hands, but that doesn't allow me to check out mentally. Because, you know, if I just start on something like paradiddles, I mean, I can have a conversation over paradiddles, and I don't even really have to think about them a whole lot. I've played them so much, the muscle memory is there for it. I don't have to do too much. But if I pick something like this, I have to think a little bit more. And so there's a couple of variations that I'll do on this. Basically what we're doing is we're doing 3 on each hand. Remember our exercise we had a few videos ago where we played groupings of 3/16 notes, and it sort of traversed across the beat. Well, this one does the same thing, but it just does it not with flams, but with single strokes. And so we're just doing 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, and that leaves us an entire beat that we can do something with. In this variation of it, I'll play all 4 of those with one hand. So there's my 4 E and a. If I play it that way, then it throws it back over to the left side. So I do that same kind of 3/4 grouping, and but it starts with the left hand this time. So I got 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, and then it throws it back into the right hand lead. So we're just playing. And you'll notice, depending on how well this microphone picks this up, these sticks are actually 2 different pitches. I don't think they came out of the same pair. I just grabbed a pair out of my stick bag without even looking. So they're not actually pitch matched. Not ProMark's fault. That's Brian grabbing these out of the stick bag. Anyway, so you actually hear the different pitches there. So if you think of, in this case, it's kind of an asset, because now I can hear 2 different melodic pitches, so I can kind of hear the melody that happens as I play this. Hopefully this mic that's sitting down here will pick that up. You actually can hear a higher pitch in my left hand. And at any point, if I do start to check out mentally, and I start thinking about, I don't know, the chickens or the spiders or whatever's out here, or then I have a variation on this that I can do that doesn't flip it around. And basically, instead of doing 4 in each hand, you can do 2 in each hand. So you're just doing 1, 2, So it's just a variation on that, where instead of 4 strokes in each hand, you do a pair of double strokes. It takes you into the next bar. So just a quick little warm-up that you can do. You can see how fast you can get that, especially that version with the double strokes, because that's a great way to start working on your triple stroke roll. And really, any kind of rhythmic pattern you may play, especially when it comes to adding flams, where you need to get 3 notes out of one hand. So yeah, so there's a warm-up for you. Hopefully that'll give you something else that you can do with your hands. And the next thing I want to talk about, I'm actually going to have to use my phone for this because I put some thoughts down. I had a student ask me the other day, said Brian, what are the hallmarks of an intermediate drummer? Well, what he asked me was, what's the difference between an intermediate drummer and a professional drummer? Non-professional drummer, professional drummer is what I think he was getting at. But like an intermediate to advanced, you know, some people think that's about the content that you can play, or the type of difficulty in the things that you're studying. But when it comes to, we'll say, professional players, professional drummers specifically, and non-professional drummers, What are some of the things that I see? I wrote 6 things down. We'll see if we got time to talk about all of them. When it comes to drummers specifically, the first one I notice is way too much tension when playing and holding the sticks. I see guys that really sort of gorilla grip the sticks, and especially locking off that index finger and that thumb. And the moment that you do that, you create a lot of problems for yourself. And in a lot of cases, you limit the possibilities for what you can do, what you can play, the kind of sound that you can get. Would sit right under the pine trees where they can just drop stuff all over me. Anyway, next time I'll think about this a little bit better before I decide to go outside. If I end up with looking like alfalfa with one of these little pine needles stuck in my head, I think I'm gonna leave it. Anyway, if you're holding the sticks too tight, you tend to get a more staccato sound. You tend to get a much less a sound with a lot less depth. You end up not pulling the sound out of the drums, which is really what you want to do. You're not trying to push the sound through the drums or the cymbals. You're trying to pull the tone out of them. And so that's the initial thing that I noticed from people that are much too tight, especially in their hands when they're playing. But the other thing is, it really just it decreases the amount of flexibility that you have. It decreases the level of relaxation that you can get and how comfortable you can sound when you play. So too much tension, squeezing the sticks. At some point we'll talk a whole lot more at length about how you can relieve that problem. They're too impatient with the time, rushing to the next beat. And this isn't just drummers, this is musicians in general. I was talking about this the other day with my friend Brad Williams, who I'll be on his podcast in a few weeks, the Bandwidth tapes. To me, a lot of times intermediate or non-professional musicians, they're so impatient with the time that they're rushing to get to the next beat. They may not notice that they're rushing it, especially if it's an easy song. Let's say you've got a 3-chord song and you're only just playing 16th notes. Where if you're playing on bass or if you're just having to play, it's a subtle thing that I see drummers do, or musicians in general do, where they're just a shade on the front side of the beat, getting to the next beat. And if everybody is on a shade on the front side of the beat, unless you're talking about high-level jazz players that know how to hold the center of the beat at a pretty steady tempo and play on the front edge, it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about musicians that are just getting to the beat a few milliseconds early, 20, 30, 40, 50 milliseconds early. In my early days playing, I would try and accommodate those players. So if I heard a piano player or a guitar player or a vocalist get to the beat early, I would try and push forward to meet the beat with them. Well, if you do that for long enough, you go from a tempo of, say, like 80 beats a minute to 92 beats a minute in the span of a couple of minutes. And all of a sudden, every song starts to speed up, and no song really tends to lock itself into a pocket. And if you're playing any kind of music that sort of begs to be danced to or grooved to, or most any kind of contemporary music, you never really get a groove that people can lock into. And so the result that I see in an audience is that audiences are less viscerally engaged with the music. They're not bopping their head. They're not moving their shoulders. They don't get up and dance. One of the goals that I have when I'm playing danceable music, music that's got an incredible groove to it, the more people I can get up and out of their chair dancing, the better I know I'm doing it, holding that tempo solid and playing that pocket with a great feel. I'm not just like playing a steady beat that doesn't speed up or slow down is sort of table stakes when you're a professional. At that point, it's about what do you do from beat to beat that can elicit this real primal kind of physical feeling from the people that are around you, either the other musicians or the people that are listening to the music that you're playing. So yeah, relax. If anything, let the beat come to you. I hear basketball players talk about after a while, after they've shot enough free throws, and we're talking 10, 15, sometimes 20 years of free throws, they talk about the basket getting bigger, and that eventually the basket gets so big that you can't miss anymore because you've learned what the correct shot feels like, the correct free throw feels like. You know before it even leaves your fingers, between the movement of your arms, the amount of speed that you're moving through the shot with, the way that the speed and the trajectory that the ball leaves your fingers, even the pressure that you exert just as the ball, like all those little details inform the shot. So most professional basketball players, they know before the shot's even left their hand whether or not it's going in the basket. That's really what they mean by, the basket gets so big. It's like all of the details about what's happening with that shot. You get so in between the cracks on it that you just know, you instinctively know. And the time is the same way. If you learn to wait on the beat will get so big eventually that you can't help but get to the next beat in the right amount of time. You just instinctively feel where it should fall, and you never find yourself rushing to get to the next beat. I could talk about that for like a whole lot of time. Too much volume overall. So on the whole, for the situation, and I see it especially now because of YouTube and drummers trying to make videos that look good more than sound good. Too much volume overall. Overall volume. Windmill drummers, so drummers that the only way they can play is to do the spaghetti arms, the windmill kind of arms. They look like one of those blow up things on the side of the road when a business is trying to get you to pay attention to the fact, hey, here's our check cash in place. And the little wind, the little dude with the noodle arms is moving. I definitely teach my students about playing in arcs and being able to smooth everything out so that your playing's not angular. But that, if you can only keep good time by doing this, there's a lot of situations. The rehearsals I've been in this week, I'm playing in a much lower volume than I'm probably going to play on stage because the rehearsal room is a lot smaller than a 2,000 seat theater. So that room is smaller, the stage is smaller. The stage is maybe 20 feet wide. 25 feet wide from front to back at the most. And it's definitely not side to side. It's not nearly as much room as we're going to have on a theatrical stage, an actual concert stage. And so if I play in that room with those four singers standing right in front of me at the same volume that I'm going to play on the show, then we're going to have a lot of problems. Number one, I'm going to wear their ears out. 5-6 hours a day of rehearsals. I'm going to wear their ears out. It's going to be harder for them to get a monitor mix that sounds good to them because my drums are going to be in every one of those vocal mics. And it's going to be really hard to, if anything, I'm compounding the volume by playing too loud. If I'm playing a coffee shop gig, this doesn't work in like a coffee shop style gig. So you've really got to learn to play at all dynamic ranges and be able to get a similar quality of sound. So as I've been playing this week and playing at a much lower volume, I've been very cognizant of trying to still get a fat, round, wide sound, even as I'm playing small. And so that it doesn't affect the overall feel. I don't want it to feel chintzy or tinsy or weak or any of these other adjectives, ticky-tacky. You still want to have a bass drum that's nice and present and fat. You still want to have a snare drum that's strong, even at a low volume. Even if I'm playing at this dynamic range, professional players on the whole, that especially if you're a freelance musician, have to learn very quickly how to get those things done. The other thing is with players that play super loud all the time, there tends to be a lot less of what we talked about last time, dynamic contrast. So to me, the drummers I love the most have an incredibly high gradient of dynamic contrast between the loud and the soft notes. Even if they're playing in a more truncated dynamic range, loud might be here, but soft might be there. And so you still get a high dynamic contrast that really makes the playing interesting and has a lot of depth to it. So playing with too much volume a lot of times, you lose all of that gradient of inner dynamic. Too many notes, and this one's not completely obvious. Most people think that too many notes means too much going on and say drum fills. But that's not necessarily the case. When I'm talking about too much notes, I'm talking about the amount of notes from bar 1 to bar 4 and the increase of note density that younger players or intermediate players or non-professional players their note density will increase from bar 5 to bar 8 just because they get bored. They feel like, well, I've already played this groove for 4 bars or 20 seconds or whatever. I need to make this more interesting. I'm kind of bored with this thing. And so you'll hear them start to put a whole lot of chatter into the groove. They'll put a whole lot of chatter into everything that falls in between the main notes of the groove. So if they're just having to go, you'll start hearing, so all of a sudden that groove, that consistent pulse, that consistent kick snare pattern that all the other musicians are locking into, if you've got vocalists are locking into, that the audience is locking into, it all of a sudden gets lost in the middle of this mishmash of just a whole bunch of notes. And for drummers, it might be more interesting to us, but because we're not listening around to the rest of the band, we're not listening to everybody, we're not listening to how what we do affects what everybody else does, all of a sudden, we're sort of taking up all the space, and no one else has the ability to experiment with that space and see what else can be done with the parts that they're playing. Plus, it just, man, how do I not belabor this point? One of the reasons why other musicians are going to want to play with you is because you make it easier for them to play. So if you're constantly a moving target and they can't really count on the thing that you're doing, there's no consistency. One bar doesn't look the same as the next. Then all of a sudden it becomes harder for them to sink into the feel of the tune and into the space of the music. They can't lose themselves in it because they're too busy having to listen to see where you are in the next bar. So yeah, it's try and find things that continue to make it interesting, even if you're just like that still is interesting to me because I'm listening to myself to make sure that I'm putting the notes in the right place, that I'm getting the right balance, the right sound, the right tone. But then I'm listening to how that affects the bass player, listening to how that affects the guitar player, I'm listening to how that affects the if we got a keyboard player, I'm listening to how that sits with the other musicians. I'm listening to how they respond to those things. All of a sudden now, going back to that thing we talked about in the other video about beginner's mindset. With my beginner's mind, I'm constantly discovering all this interesting stuff that's happening, all this novelty, so that I don't get bored with So challenge yourself to keep things to a bare minimum until you have to interject something, till the music tells you, I need something here. I need a variation on the groove, or it's time for you to play the fill. All those things that drummers that are only listening to themselves, they don't seem to pay attention to. I got a couple more for you. Inconsistent note placement. I have a whole video of this on the channel here of how to fix this. But with non-professional players, bass drum placement, especially when we're talking about E's and I's of the beat, they'll tend to be very inconsistent with where those E's and I's land. So I don't have a kit here to show you, but go watch that video. I'll put a link up like in the corner. I'll figure out how to do that and put a link in the corner so you can see that. So, and it's not just the bass drum, it's the inconsistency of the hit on the snare drum. Can you make the snare drum sound exactly the same? That backbeat sound consistently the same every single time. Now, obviously, if you're playing some kind of crazy jazz music, all these rules or mores or whatever go out the window. But when we're talking about the music that 90% of the world plays at this point, especially if you're a working player, then yeah, I mean, inconsistent note placement within the beat. The last one I got for you, and this is important. This kind of goes back to volume, but it's much deeper than that. It's lacking an inner intensity to the way that they play. And what do I mean by that? Well, with most intermediate players, what I notice about them is that for them to play with an intensity, they've got to play loud. We call it digging in. To dig in, they've got to really play loud, and everything gets bigger and everything's pushed through the drum, and it's more energy comes from more effort. And one of the things that I try and instill with my students very quickly is this idea that intensity and volume are not the same thing. With professional players can play at a level of intensity that it doesn't matter what volume you're at. Even if you're whisper quiet, there's this, I call it an inner fire. There's an inner fire that is stoked when you play that supercharges the music with this energy that makes it compelling to listen to. It's also why I don't get bored with when I'm playing a groove that might be a simple groove, because I'm constantly reaching down deep in myself, trying to get deep inside to stoke this inner flame that I've got, so that all of the notes have an intensity to them that make them compelling to listen to. I was teaching at a school I won't name back in the late 90s. I'll just say a vocational school for musicians. You get from that what you want. And I had a drummer one time that it was a jazz performance lab, and he put one hand behind his back, punk rock guy, green mohawk guy, we'll call him. So green mohawk guy puts one hand behind his back and he goes swing ding da ding 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 for like 5 minutes, 6 minutes as this jazz tune is going on. And he does this for a grade. And so I grade him 0 on pretty much everything. I think I might have given him a 1 for time consistency. Afterwards, he looked at his grade, which was abysmal. He got mad at me. He was like, man, this jazz is just easy. I don't even see why we have to do this. All I'm sitting here doing is swing, ding, da ding, ding, da ding, ding, da ding, for the whole time. And I had to tell him, number one, I think you're missing the point. That swing, ding, da ding, ding, da ding, ding, da ding, is the launch pad for everything else that can happen in this music. Those are table stakes that you can play that rhythm with a good feel and a consistent time. But more than anything, the reason why I gave you a 1 instead of a 99 like you were expecting was there was no intensity to this. Swing, ding, da ding, 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 ding, da ding. You checked out completely on the inside to this music. So by doing that, and by serving up that really lame thing, you made it impossible for everybody else to have any chance of playing that tune with any real depth or intensity. It all starts with us drummers. If we don't reach deep in ourselves and pull out some kind of emotional thing that we can interject into the music, even at a really soft level, the music's going to be flat. And that's one of the things that I notice about, we'll call it intermediate or non-professional players, is that they're externalizing all of their intensity. And if they're not able to externalize it, they can't play with a ton of motion. They can't play with a ton of volume. They can't play with a lot of velocity. Then all of their intensity goes away and the music just gets flat. So as you're practicing, try that. Even as you're playing a basic groove, see if you can find something, almost like an actor. Find something in your life that causes you to feel emotional. It could be an ex-wife. It could be someone you had an argument with, and the two might be the same person. It could be something in the world that you think is an injustice. Anything that stokes anger, and see if you can infuse that anger into the thing that you're doing, and see how it changes the quality of sound. Think of something that makes you incredibly happy and infuse that into the thing that you're playing, and see how it changes the notes that you're... If you're playing a ballad and it's about losing somebody, instead of thinking, you're playing John Mayer Gravity. It's very easy. I see students all the time, they're just doom, doom, ding, ba, ding, ding, doom, ding, ding, ba. And then by like the third bar, they're completely checked out. Think about what that song is about. That song is about basically getting in your own way, and how sad or how disappointed you can be in yourself. Gravity's working against you. You're either upset with gravity or you're upset with yourself that you can't seem to overcome whatever the hurdle is, whatever the pitfall is, whatever the problem is. Like, what does that really feel like when you're disappointed in yourself? Play with disappointment and the intensity that comes from real deep-seated heartbreaking disappointment, and see how it changes the intensity that you play without changing the volume at all. So those are 6 things that I see as hallmarks of intermediate players or non-professional players, players that still have a long way to go. We all have been there. Some of us stay there. Some of us slide back to there. I see professional players that I would start to see these things slide into their playing 20 or 30 years after they've been playing. I have players that come and study with me that have been playing for 30 years and they don't know why they need to come to lessons. But they come and they study with me, and we start to dig into these things, like that last one. And it's an eye-opening experience for them to understand that music is more than just a physical act. Music is an emotional act that we undertake every time we pick up our tools, every time we pick up our instrument, every time we engage the notes that we got to play. So that's all I got for you today. I got to go. It's about time for us to head out for the day. I really appreciate you hanging out with me and sticking around. If you like this content, if you want more of this stuff, please hit that thumbs up, that like, hit the subscribe button, because most of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. I would love to have you as a subscriber, and please share this with a friend if you found it valuable. So that's all I got for you today. Until next time, be awesome to yourself, be extra awesome to everybody that you meet. Until next time, I'll see you again in a place that's probably not Boston.